see you, ma'am. Is
Yes.
there anything disturbing you?
It's a matter of long ago. Right now I was trying to remember my own grandson and rejoice. We just got him settled at college in his dormitory room. He's very excited. And when he graduated last spring, the whole family was together, and the party lasted for several days. We had siblings together and cousins together and generations together. And that's so important to establish and reestablish and maintain those family ties. And that was what we were able to do. We're not all so fortunate to be able to do that. I was sitting here thinking about a young man named Marvin Davis. We had gone through world wars. In the beginning of this century, we had had World War I. It was the first time that a conflict had been that distributed around the world. And 20 million people died in that war. When it was finally over, the armistice, they said that there was never be another war that would include the globe. That had to be the war to end all wars. And in the meantime, Marvin Davis was born here in New Albany on the 10th of January in 1932, and he grew up at 135 West Main Street, hometown, US of A. When World War II came, he was still a little fellow, and he was safe from that conflict. That is the most engulfing war, the most violent conflict, and the bloodiest conflict that the world has ever seen. 58 million casualties, and of course more in injuries and property destroyed and dreams destroyed, families destroyed. At the end of that war, they decided that it was not realistic to say that there must never be another war. There must never be another world war. They would try to contain any conflicts. Much better to have small conflicts in small areas than to risk another global war. It was very soon tested out. At the end of the war, the nation of Korea had been divided, and the North Koreans were supported by the Chinese and the Soviet Union. The South Koreans were supported by the rest of the Allies from World War II. Situation lasted for a few years. During that time, the Allies became less and less willing to play nicely with each other. And finally, the North was determined to retake the South. And the South had not been preparing for war. And the North had. They had been calling up troops. They had been getting military equipment in from their allies. And they invaded South Korea on the 25th of June, 1950. On the 25th and the 27th of June, the United Nations met and passed directives. President Truman did not want to wait to call back the United States Congress, wait for them to reassemble, gavel themselves into session. I have proposals presented and debated, and then votes whether or not to declare war on North Korea. On the 25th of June, President Truman called up United States troops and sent them to South Korea for a United Nations police action against the North Koreans. They arrived on the 1st of July. And suddenly the North Koreans had resistance, which they had really not counted on. There was the area called the Pusan Perimeter, and that was where the fighting was established at that time. And there were a few hills there, which of course are always strategic in warfare to gain the high ground, and they were numbered to so they could be readily identified on maps. For the United States, there was Hill 303, and the North Koreans held it, and they were poised to do some major damage and continue in the terrain there to retake a good portion of South Korea. So that was where the United States was concentrating some of its troops, and the North Koreans by that time were already faced with POWs. They had captured some of the United States forces, and they were being held on Hill 303 in a ravine there. And the North Koreans realized that if they were going to have to suddenly relocate or shift around on their deployments, these POWs were going to be a hindrance, because a certain number of soldiers would have to be detailed to guard them and keep them under control. So the North Korean commander said, kill them. And they did. 41 United States prisoners of war. On the 3rd of September, Marvin Davis found himself on a hill nearby, Hill 300. Let me read you the presidential citation of what happened. The President of the United States takes pride in presenting the Distinguished Service Cross to Marvin L. Davis, Corporal, United States Army, for extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy of the United Nations while serving with a machine gun section of Company H, 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment, Infantry, 1st Cavalry Division. Corporal Davis distinguished himself by extraordinary heroism in action against enemy aggressor forces in the vicinity of Wagwan, Korea on 3 September 1950. On that date, Company F, 7th Cavalry Regiment, was an attached machine gun section from Company H, was defensively deployed on Hill 300 near Wagwan when elements of a hostile division launched a mass attack against the hill, preceded by an intense artillery and mortar barrage. When it became apparent that the hill could not be held against the numerically superior enemy force, the company was ordered to withdraw. Corporal Davis, a machine gunner attached to the company, and 2 comrades volunteered to remain behind and cover the withdrawal. He remained at his gun, delivering accurate, withering fire into the ranks of advancing enemy until his position was overrun, then began throwing hand grenades and engaging the enemy in hand-to-hand combat. When the company launched a counterattack later in the day and regained the hill, Corporal Davis was found dead beside his machine gun, and the surrounding area was littered with enemy dead. The extraordinary heroism and selfless devotion to duty displayed by Corporal Davis enabled his company to execute a successful withdrawal with minimum casualties. That memory stays with me, but I want you to enjoy the rest of this beautiful evening. There are many who have given the last full measure to make it possible for us and enjoy it.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's such a sad story. Before we leave, I'm going to steal a moment. Just a little bit. I've told you about Washington C. DePaul. We've looked at it. If you would like a picture of the Washington C. DePaul, he's the